So let's take a look now at creating our own shapes for our shape library. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is creating a 1D shape. And if we remember back to the previous section in Primitives 2, that all of our 1D shapes are open-ended. So we have to keep that in mind. And one thing I like to do is to first start out with the line tool and just draw out a perfectly straight line to have the complete end of our curve, just so we can use it as a reference to snap to, and that way we're making sure that we are very specific about keeping that a straight open end. And if I hold down the Control key, we can see that we're also constraining as I draw out this line. So that's another thing to keep in mind while you're using any of your tools, is if you want to constrain, you can just hold down that Control key and it'll keep you straight on that axis. So now I'm going to hit the space bar, and we're going to move over into our second layer and just put that line in the background. We also want to make sure in the snap panel that we have background layer snap on. And now we're going to use our primitives and just create a couple of different shapes in here. And I'm also going to move on and show you some of the edit commands as well, because we are not going to want these extra curves in here, because I'm going to want to move something along the side here. Okay. And I'm going to use the line tool, hold down Control, and then I'm just going to go ahead and snap to that endpoint. And I'm also going to use the line tool over here and just snap to that other endpoint. Now with this shape, what we want to do is remove this section. So I'm just going to go down to our edit commands, and what we have is a delete segment and a trim. And I'm going to select trim right now and just click on those sections to remove them. And then we can deactivate that tool. So now we have a shape that we can use within our 1D library. And before we add anything to our 1D library, we want to make sure that we join our curves. So we're going to go down to Mass Edit, click Join. Now we can see we have 5 curves that are joined. We can take a look and select this, and now it's all together. Because before we had one curve here and one curve for each individual shape that we created. So you always want to make sure that you join it before you go ahead and add it to your library. And we'll be covering these tools more in depth in other sections. So now that we have this basic shape created, take a look at our perspective view and see it. We can add this to our 1D library. And within this we can create our own custom libraries if we want. So we can create library. I'm going to type in custom for my specific shapes. And the shape name, I'm just going to call this custom_01, and then click add shape. And now we can see this profile show up within our viewer. We also have the ability to flip this shape around if we wanted to, both up and down. It's sort of a vertical flip. So once it's added, I can go ahead and close that out. And now I'm going to delete this. And I'll delete our reference line that we created as well. And if we move to our Primitives 2 section, we can go to the Pattern 1D. And we're going to draw out our shape, holding down Control to make that perfectly straight. Pull that out. If we hit N on the keyboard, it'll bring up our numeric. We can change our library now to our custom that we've created, and now we can see that shape in there. So now we can adjust the count if we wanted to, and we can use this shape to cut out of other objects or design whatever it is we want. So go ahead and delete that. And now let's move on to adding to our 2D library. And the 2D library works pretty much the same way, except in this case we don't have any open curves. We don't have any open ends. So we can basically create anything that we want. I'll just add some circles in here. And then I'll add a rectangle on the side there. And we have the add curve boolean on right now, just so that we're combining all of this. And then I'll go ahead, back to our rectangle, open N for the numeric. I'm going to click subtract and just remove some of these points, also using the circle. And now we have something that's completely closed off. And before we go ahead and add this to the library, we want to make sure we click join. Because right now, if I go ahead and select this, you can see that all of our curves are separated by the objects that we used to create them. We'll deselect all that, click join. 9 curves have been joined. So now if we select it, it's just one straight curve, which shows up as a polygon. And now we can go to Add to 2D Library. And I'm going to set up a custom library. So I'll create library, call this custom. And we don't have to worry about this conflicting with our other library called custom, because both our 1D and 2D libraries are in separate folders within our preset folder in the Lightwave directory. So I'm going to call this custom underscore 0. Custom underscore 01. Click add shape. We can also adjust this now both horizontally and vertically. And we could also delete the shape as well, or even delete our library. Adjust our preview rows to take a look at it a little bit better. I'm going to close that out, delete our object. We're going to move on to the More tab within Primitives 2. Select Pattern 2D. Just draw this out. And right now we don't see anything. Open Numeric, we can see we have it on Subtract. So I'm going to turn that to Off. Change our library to Custom. And now we can see that shape that we created. And now we can use this to edit and cut things out just like we did before. And it's very, very powerful to be able to use these custom objects and create your own libraries and just have the kind of shapes that you want. So if there's something that's not already there, you can go ahead and create it, add it to your library, just making sure that you join your object first and that you have an object for 2D that's completely outlined, or for the 1D that we have at least one open shape. So I could even use part of this right now to create a 1D tool. So I'm going to hit the space bar. And if I wanted to convert this to more of a 1D shape, what I would have to do, I'm going to go down to Trim, Undo. I want to use Delete Segment so that we're not trimming the whole polygon. And we can go in here and just delete these different segments. And I'm going to delete that one as well. Spacebar. And I'm going to pull up our snap panel, make sure that we have end and project on. I'm going to create a line now from here, select our other point, project downward, and now we have what we can use as a 1D shape. So I could join this, add to 1D library, change this to our custom, and just call this custom underscore 02, add shape. And now we can see that new shape is in there. But it is a little bit off. And it's not quite exactly what we've drawn. So let's take a look and for the reason for that. I'm going to close this out. And I'm going to hit T on the keyboard just to move this. We're going to move this over to our line over here. And now our main problem is that we're extending beyond the bounds of our starting lines. If I was to take these points, and I'm just going to hit H on the keyboard for our stretch tool, and just stretch these out beyond where our specific shapes are going. What I also want to do is just double check and make sure that is one curve, and it is. And now we're going to go to Add to 1D Library. I can call this custom underscore 03, add shape, and now you can see our shape shows up perfectly. So those first two lines that we have are very important, which is one of the reasons why I like to have that background line, so I sort of know the bounds in which to create an object. So it's definitely one thing to keep in mind while you're adding your custom shapes. Especially with the 1D library. With the 2D, you have a lot more freedom in creating specific shapes, but that's because it works a little bit differently. If we were to have sort of an explanation of that, is if I was to use the count tool now, with the way it was previously, we would have a lot of overlapping areas because these 2 points on the open end define our overall length of our shape, and we wouldn't want them overlapping. So that way we make sure that we have these on the outside, we have no overlaps, and then there's no problems with adding it to the library.